Item number 1, please.
Order recommending acceptance of the proposal of ZooOceanarium Group, LLC, for a contract negotiation related to professional management services at the Jackson Zoological Park.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. We asked to have a special meeting to discuss this particular item because I know we have lots of questions about this proposal and this plan. Do you want to begin, Dr. Blaine, or do you want to have a chance for the representatives from the ZooOceanarium Group to introduce themselves and let them begin?
I'd welcome the opportunity to introduce our guests from the ZooOceanarium Group.
Your microphone on?
Yeah, the light's on. Hello?
Yeah. Can y'all hear?
So, one of our representatives, Chris Davis, is actually in Singapore right now. I know it's 3 o'clock in the morning there, so I want to thank him for getting up especially early to join with us. We had the pleasure of meeting with the ZooOceanarium Group at the Jackson Zoo and toured the zoo together with them, and we were very impressed with their ideas of the zoo. They were very supportive of initiatives at the zoo and felt that the partnership with the city was a strong opportunity for both organizations. So at this time, I would like to introduce them and let them be able to talk a little bit more about themselves.
We'll give you...
Thank you, Dr. Blaine. Thank you, Dr. Blaine, for that. Just double-checking my microphone is working yet.
Yes, it is working.
Okay, perfect. I just want to start off by thanking you all opportunity of being considered for this project. We're really excited about it. I think to summarize ZooOceanarium Group, we're a relatively small group of really passionate people that absolutely love what we do and love working with animals and really strive towards providing world-class care for the animals that we take care of, and then creating these unique experiences for guests that come through our projects, really to create this understanding and opportunity for education of the guests. Jackson Zoo is very interesting to us. We think it kind of embodies what we think zoos should. It's the perfect meeting place and opportunity for families and friends and communities to come together. Animals have this very unique ability to kind of cut through political affiliations or socioeconomic levels or even religious backgrounds. Everybody loves animals. So we think Jackson Zoo is perfectly located for that. We are really excited about working with the city to develop it to its full potential. So I think that kind of summarizes where we are.
Okay, do you want to give your colleague, Miss Clark, anything to add? I'm not sure if she's up at 3 a.m. too.
Thank you. I'm in St. Louis, so it's a much more, it's a better hour where I am. I just want to second Chris. We really do thank you for the opportunity to be considered for this. We are quite excited about it, as Chris said. This is what we do, and nobody works with animals because it's going to make them rich. They work with animals because they love them. And we're really quite excited about having the opportunity to help develop the Jackson Zoo into something that the city should be proud of.
Okay. I'll open up unless you or Dr. Blaine have anything else you'd like to add at the time, I think we'd like to open the floor to questions from council colleagues. Is that okay? All right. Questions? Anyone have questions? All right, well, I sent a list of questions over to the administration. Did you guys have a chance to look at them?
We did.
Okay, so I'd like to dive in with this is a zoo that is in a low, moderate income area. What is your experience in developing and working in a zoo in such an environment? And what is your plan financially to turn the zoo around? Or what's your approach going to be?
Sure. I'll take that one. I think we did have an opportunity to visit the zoo. It was a really good visit. We got a really good lay of the land as far as where the zoo is at and the section of the city. We come to the table with experience from 10 different countries, many of which are true melting pots. Our specific projects, my background is started at Disney Animal Kingdom. We've got projects in Dubai, and then over on kind of the other side of the spectrum, we worked on projects over in Dhaka, Bangladesh, which are again, the demographics there are quite different. Definitely an urban zoo such as Jackson Zoo, it has its own unique characteristics, but at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, people's love of animals does tend to be a common trait, and I think we would really strive towards making sure that the zoo is a place for everybody. Specifics of how we would do it, I think, what we really want to do is get ourselves in, get a little bit of lay of the land. We certainly don't want to make any recommendations at this point as far as wholesale changes or anything like that. We want to leverage what's there. We want to learn what the efficiencies are, historical efficiencies as well as the historical inefficiencies. And really, the main way we're going to do that is to get our team on the ground and get a good understanding of what is there and how we can leverage the things that are already present.
You have one right here. Mr. Foote?
Thank you all for joining us today. So get the team on the ground. Can you tell me how many people are in the team? Are you going to be part team from out of town and hire some local people? And just what's your expense going to be to run the zoo on going forward, either for a year or
hearing aids with binaural wireless.
However you want to frame it.
Sure. I think the question is staff on the ground, who's basically going to be there, and then the other question is whether we bring in a team or utilize the team there. Is that a pretty accurate summary of the question?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, cool. I think, going back to what I said, we're a team of really passionate individuals. We welcome anyone to the team that shares our passion and complements our goals. We would anticipate coming into Jackson Zoo, there's probably going to be individuals that we bring. Well, there will be individuals from our team that we bring in, especially for the initial assessment. We are very hopeful that there will be staff members there that are already at the zoo that stay, that will assist with, let's call it, kind of a corporate memory of what's going on, what's happened historically. We also would like to bring in some new folks, which are equally vital for looking at, similar problems at little different perspective and different approaches. As far as how many folks we have, we've got a relatively large team. When I say relatively large team, I think, from the zoo standpoint, we probably got 4 or 5 people we would initially bring in to assist with that assessment and figuring out who are the best individuals long term, both there at the zoo already as well as supplementing our own team. As far as cost of operations, it's a little bit too early to throw out a number, I think, at that, but our goal would be to do it within the same envelope that it's been operated in over the past few years. I should also say our goal would be to make it to move it towards a self-sustaining entity. We know the city has helped it out considerably over the past few years. I believe there was an audit in play that we would love to get a look at and fully understand that before we can jump in and start throwing numbers at it.
All right. Mr. Foote, does that complete your question for
Right now, yeah.
For right now? All right, Councilman Stamps and Councilman Tillman.
Okay, hello, sir, and thank you for giving us some time today. My first question, I have two questions. My first question is, hello.
Yeah, you just got to
Can you
speak
turn
up.
the gain up, please? Can you turn the gain up? So my first question is, the contribution from the city to the zoo, what do you project that to be for the first 2 years? There's a gain button on the thing. I don't normally have to do that.
I think, sorry, Chris, do you want to take this one? I apologize.
No, go ahead.
I think at this stage it's a little too early for us to tell. We'd like to get some information on the historical runnings of the facility to essentially get an audit in place of what it has looked like in the past in order for us to be able to really flesh this out in the future. We know that there's been some inefficiencies in the past, but we want to understand where those are and where also the strengths of the current zoo at the moment before we can give you a solid number.
All right, Dr. Blaine. Speak up. I'm sorry.
There's a gain.
The conversations that we've been having around financial contributions are within the envelope that we currently have, which is near a $990,000 contribution each year, as well as the remaining of the state funds for renovations, which are $400,000.
All right, Councilman Stamps, do you have any follow-up questions?
My last question for right now is simply, it seems as though the assessment of what needs to be done hasn't fully taken place from your side, but we have a contract that we've been presented for you to take on the reins of the zoo. So on your side, have you fully studied the scope of what's necessary to move forward? Because when we vote for the contract that's on the table, you'll be responsible going forward. So, because I hear a lot of talk about assessment and see what's going on. Have you fully assessed and then prepared a plan, or are we presented with a contract to allow for you to, and I'm looking this way because that's where you are. I know y'all looking that way, but can you just talk me through where you are in your assessment to prepare to execute this contract?
Sure, I'll jump in there. The answer to your question is we have reviewed the contract. We see no yellow flags or even red flags in it. As Dr. Blaine said, what we're discussing is within the envelope that you guys, within the envelope of historically what has been provided for the zoo. We would be foolish to sit here and tell you we understand 100% of the financial situation of the zoo. Even when we started going through some of the, when our team started going through some of the reports from historical reporting, we found some we found a few discrepancies between different reports, and it's my understanding that there was an audit being conducted, which would probably give us a little bit more visibility of it, but as a whole, as we look at the contract, we don't see anything objectionable from a commercial standpoint. There is still some conversations that do need to happen, but we didn't find anything objectionable. And when I talk about doing an assessment, there are some renovations that need to be made on the zoo. Some of those renovations, what we really want to do is we want to get in and we want to find out what that low-hanging fruit is, how to utilize the existing assets most efficiently, and then we want to put together a priority list. We don't want to come to you all and say, listen, we need to spend $300,000 on the bear exhibit, when in fact the front gate needs the work and should be the priority. So really, we just want to come in, we want to take a look at it, we want to figure out exactly where the most bang for our buck would be as far as any kind of renovations. We want to find out where our energy should be spent. And we're only going to do that once you get in and start operating the zoo. That's when the things are going to start falling into place. So the short answer to your question, we're very comfortable with our assessment of the zoo from a standpoint of we've got a team that can come in and get it running efficiently in a relatively short period of time.
If I may add, I think that it would also be somewhat irresponsible of ZooOceanarium if they made too many declaratory statements regarding what all they must do when we don't know the full depth of all of the managerial deficits over time, all of the financial deficits over time. But they do understand, being a company that has such extensive experience in working with zoos and aquariums around the world, they understand the scope of their responsibility by entering into this contract. And I think that is what is essential here, is that they understand what obligations they are taking on by entering this contract. And if they don't have any immediate concerns about that, based on that experience, I think that says a lot.
All right, Dr. Blaine, you wanted to add something?
I just wanted to add that we are still under contract negotiations. So the first step is their approval as a management company. The second step is that we bring back a contract that the two of us have agreed on for confirmation by the council. So today, our focus is on ZooOceanarium Group as a management group. And then we will bring forward a contract that has all of the specifics of the relationships.
All right. Mr. Tillman, then Ms. Lindsay.
Thank you for visiting our city. Thank you for willingness to work with us to give our zoo a great jump start. And certainly thank you for working directly with the administration. You have some worldwide experience in running zoos, and in visiting the Jackson Zoo, which you said is an urban zoo, which is in our city. What do you think, or how would you engage the community that's immediately around the zoo, who over the years had an organization that they were willing to work with the zoo, but somewhere down the line was a breakdown in not getting notices out to the community when meetings and other activities were ongoing at the zoo. So how would you engage the immediate community that's adjacent to the zoo, that's really willing to work with the zoo to improve the zoo? And then my second question is, what is your experience in increasing attendance at the zoo?
Okay, good questions. I'm just writing those down so I don't how to engage immediate. And I'm sorry, can you repeat that second portion of the question, please?
The second question what is your experience? How would you increase attendance at the zoo?
Okay. The how to engage the immediate neighborhood. What we really, I think the strongest point we want to make here today is we want to work with the city. Nobody knows this zoo and the demographics, the surrounding areas, any better than you all do. We want to work with Mr. Ison and Dr. Blaine to really go at this, in the proper way. As far as how to engage the immediate neighborhood, I can't necessarily give you specifics on it at this point because we do want to understand from you all, where you think the strengths and weaknesses. What we've understood so far is the city needs to the community needs to understand that the zoo is there to stay. It's not moving, and I think us coming on board, I believe would be a pretty strong statement. Anything that came out of any of our mouths would serve to solidify the fact that the zoo is where it is, and we're excited about that. The immediate community, we would be working. The zoo can't be treated as an island. In our view, it should be seen in commercial terms as almost an anchor tenant of that area, and we should be leveraging the strengths of the zoo and of the park as a whole in order to attract visitors over to it. Again, how we do that, we would need to work very closely with the city because there are some adjacent areas that we don't necessarily have direct control of, but from the city standpoint, you all do have the ability for controlling some of the things that need to go on in that area. How to engage the immediate neighborhood, again, we want to make it not just for the immediate neighborhood, we want to make it an inviting zoo. We want to make it a very interactive, experiential type trip to the zoo. We want to facilitate the types of interactions that you see at other world-class zoos around the country, around the world. That's kind of the summary of that. Your question on how to increase attendance, we've got a few ideas. There's in looking at some of the initiatives that have been taken. Some of them seem to do really well. Zoo Brew, I think, was one of them that pulls in a lot of folks. We would really look at some of those programs, which we have folks on board that's their role. I'll give you a couple of examples. We've got Bernard Harrison he's a former CEO of Singapore Zoo. He was the creator of the first night safari. A very bright, business-minded zoo individual. He would be working with us on this project. He's got some really good ideas on how to increase, how to make it more attractive to a wide demographic. So we certainly would be. We believe the statement of the zoo is here to stay would go a long ways towards people recognizing that the zoo's open for business, come through, and obviously working with the city to make sure that statement is backed up by actions.
Can I add something? While I certainly appreciate all that Chris just delivered to us, and I'm of like mind of the zoo remaining in its present location, I just want to make it clear for those who may have a difference of opinion that what we're dealing with right now is not the question of whether a zoo moves or does not move. We're talking about the effective management of the current zoo and only zoo that we have at this time. And so if someone has a difference of opinion about where the zoo is located, I would ask that you don't allow that to interfere with the decision that is before us. And that decision before us is ensuring that we have first-class management, most experienced management that the city will have ever had in terms of operating a zoo.
Tillman? All right, Council Lady Lindsay.
Thank you. I too sent some questions along earlier. Have you seen those?
I believe we have. We got a pretty thorough list of questions. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My questions were sent to them too, Mr. Mayor. Do you know? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Question for the administration. When will we see the results of the special audit?
Say that again?
When will we see the results of the special audit that's being done of the zoo? I think we approved that back in October.
I'd have to get an answer on that. I don't have one immediately for you. Dr. Blaine may have more insight on the results of the special audit when he returns back in the room.
Okay. What I want to just make sure I'm clear on what's before us today. The only thing we're being asked to approve today is whether or not we, as the City of Jackson, want to move forward in entering into contract negotiations with this company. Is that correct?
Yes, as the selected company from the RFP to manage the zoo.
How long do you anticipate this negotiation process taking?
From the discussions that have taken place thus far, I think that there have been a lot of questions put on the table from the very onset of our interaction, and so that leads to a framework of what the agreement should look like. I don't envision a protracted negotiation period.
Okay.
That is a question better situated for the city attorney's office, but I don't envision,
Do we have any idea how much it is going to cost to operate the zoo this year, to keep it going?
I think that kind of speaks to, I don't think that any of us up here are qualified to say, if we did nothing right now, I don't think that any of us, sit qualified to say how much the zoo is going to cost. I think that the point that this group is aware of what the city's historic allocations have been to the zoo, that they have a rough analysis of where the zoo is presently situated and the conditions, still giving themselves the wiggle room that they have to do a deeper dive to ascertain all of the factors, leaves us comfortable with moving forward with them at this time. But to your point, I think that is an important question. But whether or not we choose this company is still a question that we have to fully ascertain the answer to.
I have other questions, but I've asked three, and I'll turn it over to other people.
I just wanted to give out Dr. Blaine, if he knows the answer to your first question, the opportunity.
Dr. Blaine, we were wondering when the special audit, I think we voted on that in October, when we anticipate the results of that audit.
We have had an initial conversation with Bruno and Turvalon. We're anticipating the formal report. We haven't gotten the formal report back from them yet. Our initial conversation with them was focusing on the past 2 years and looking at whether or not there are any anomalies that would cause us to do a deeper dive. And so we're anticipating that report coming back to us now. We've had some initial conversations. They've had some initial findings. But I hesitate to share those until we have the actual report from them.
Mr. Foote?
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of questions for Chris and Aaron, and maybe might be questions for the city as well. But in the past, there's been a community involvement with the zoo. That we had a community board that would oversee the zoo, and there was some discussion. There were some problems from time to time where they didn't have open meetings for citizens, interested citizens to attend. Are there going to be any kind of board meetings that would citizens who had an interest would be able to see sort of the ongoing management of the zoo at sort of the organizational level and provide some oversight?
I think to go back to what Chris had said earlier, we'd like to really work with the city on this one. So we don't have any intent to operate the zoo in a box. We don't think that anybody should be making a unilateral decision on it. I think it's something that has to have feedback from both sides. So in our past experience, are we open to having the public involved? Absolutely. We want to develop a zoo that is attractive to the public and that serves their needs. But whether or not that's done in this particular forum, we'd really kind of default to you guys on how we would like to see that move forward.
Okay, follow-up question would be, we also have donors, benefactors who have given money to what the time was a nonprofit zoo. So is it going to be a legal setup where people can make charitable contributions and that are tax deductible to the setup, to the zoo?
It's a great question, and it's something that we're currently working on with our current project here in St. Louis. Really, the legalities of that would need to be worked out once the contract is sorted, so that we can make sure we're focusing on things in the correct order. But if that was the decision, then we would absolutely support that.
Okay. The last question I've got, and this is the one that I think is most important to me, is you mentioned coming in and finding out that you might need $300,000 for the bear exhibit, or the front gate needs to be repaired. I guess my question would be, the city's got limited financial resources. I wish we had the resources of Dubai or Singapore, but we do not have those resources. So my question is we need to know what the scope of the city's financial future obligations ongoing are going to be. So if we're not going to be in a position where if you come to us after you've off and running and say, gee whiz, we need to do the tiger exhibit, it's going to cost us $250,000. We just don't have that kind of money available. So is there a way to get a handle on what the future obligations the city's going to face?
I think, again, the best way for us to be able to do that is to be in and operating it. Looking at it remotely, any organization, I think it would be foolish for somebody to come in and say, it's only going to cost you X, without actually being hands-on there and understanding what the obligations really are. In the past, we operate from a phased approach. I think, as Chris said, we would first identify what those kind of easy button issues are, ones that could be resolved quickly with minimal cost, and then from there it's understanding what your next level of priority is and developing a plan to make sure that happens, whether that requires is supported by city funds, whether that comes from operational budget, and so we would outline that very clearly for everybody, I think. But at this stage, it would be very foolish and unprofessional of us to make any comments on what we think that really is until we're really hands on the ground.
All right.
I'd like to add also, if I could just add, we didn't see anything with the zoo that is inoperational, that would absolutely have to be fixed or repaired. We also didn't necessarily do a really deep dive of it. What we can say is our goal would be to work with the zoo as it is, and develop kind of that priority list of how we think it can be improved. And one of the first questions to us was, how are we going to increase attendance? What we're talking about is making the zoo better. Specifically, Johannesson Zoo, we didn't see anything in there that needs to be corrected immediately, that money needs to be thrown out. If we start talking about increasing zoo attendance, making it much more attractive for younger generation, then there potentially is some money that would need to be put at the project.
I'd like to make note to the council on this point that there are funds, bond funds, reserved for the zoo that are still available once the city clears to the DFA. That we're okay with the group utilizing them to enhance the attraction.
All right, Dr. Lane.
I would also like to add that in our tour through the zoo, we had lots of conversations about ways to enhance the zoo. Many of them were simply around cleaning up the exhibits that are currently there, maintenance for several exhibits, and making the zoo an overall more attractive experience. This is all a part of the current contract that we have with the zoo. In addition, as the mayor said, the funds from the state to be used, $400,000 are available from the state for renovations to the zoo. I think that the first part of our work together is to essentially decide what does our zoo need to look like, and that's the real conversation. Where are we trying to go with our zoo? And then from there to assess what a phased-in plan of that development looks like. That comes along with financial modeling. How much money do we need to raise from philanthropic, from private giving? How much money do we need to raise from the state? Are there opportunities for the city to pitch in? We need to be able to co-create that process together. And that's a part of what we've talked about, of the city working much closer hand in hand with the zoo management. Historically, we've had a system where we appointed the board and then we were pretty much hands off. What we've been talking about is being able to have a much more collegial interaction with the zoo staff so that we're able to co-create what the vision is and to be able to work with a world-class management firm in order to be able to create the kind of zoo that we really want to see in our community.
All right, Mr. Stamps, you had a question?
Just a very quick question. The memberships that people paid for, will those memberships be transferable? And the other relationships, how will those relationships transfer between organizations?
I'll jump in on this one. Our goal isn't to come in and change everything. I think we would be foolish to in blunt terms, piss off the folks that are supporting the zoo with annual memberships. That would certainly be one of our last prerogatives. As I understand it, the funds came into the operation of the zoo. We would certainly need to take a look at that audit to find out where the monies rest, but quite honestly, if someone paid annual membership to get into the zoo, I can't imagine any justification for us coming in and saying, there's a new operator in town and your annual membership is no longer good here.
Okay.
I think the zoo will exist as it is. We're just looking to realize some improvements on it. So just because the staff have changed doesn't mean anything that was contributed previously would be invalid.
All right, Council Lady Lindsay, then Councilman Stokes.
I just, as you continue conversations about the Jackson Zoo, I do, this is more of a statement than a question, I do want you to be very cognizant of the fact that there has been a long history of community support for this zoo in this location. And I think that it is really important that whatever this structure ends up looking like, that there still be a 501c3 nonprofit available for contributions to continue supporting the zoo, and also the volunteer base, you mentioned Zoo Brew. That was done by the nonprofit, not the zoo itself. So I want to stress the importance of keeping that whole energy in mind as we move forward.
All right, you have anything further? All right, Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first question is whether or not your company is a professional management group. And I asked that because it was stated in this city several months ago that there were no professional management group available to run the Jackson Zoo. So
make that clear that the administration has never said
no,
that. Okay.
We know the administration knew that it was, but it was said in this city that there was no professional management group available to run the Jackson Zoo, and that we had to stick with what we had. So I want to make sure that we have on the record that your company is a professional management group.
I'll gladly go on the record and say we're a professional management group. We are members of AZA. We're members of WAZA, which is the international equivalent of the AZA. We are longstanding members of IAPA, which is a amusement park organization. We are in good standing with all of those organizations and are recognized commercial members.
Thank you. The second question: how would you market the Jackson Zoo? In the state of Mississippi, you have only two zoos. One is Jackson, which is the largest, and I think the other is Hattiesburg. In the past years, before things started going downhill, they used to encourage students and schools to come from the Delta all over the state of Mississippi, some parts of Louisiana, and some parts of Arkansas. They stopped doing that. That's when the decline started, where people stopped coming to the zoo. Again, keeping in mind, there's only two zoos in the whole state of Mississippi, and the largest zoo is right here in Jackson. The potential is unlimited. How would you market the Jackson Zoo?
Yeah, we agree with that assessment. We not only from a commercial standpoint, but a zoo should be a center point for education. For certainly marketing it to the schools, we think is it's one of the requirements that we would have before we would step in and take the project. That's extremely important to us. Again, once we are able to take a look at the audit and find out how much revenue is available for advertisement, our team would again take a look and make some recommendations towards the city as to where that advertising money should be spent. But I can tell you, schools would be a very important one for us. How we do that, how we go about it, we would have to look at the historical mechanisms. We would hand it over to our marketing guys, and they would come up with a specific plan, which obviously, as we said again, being fully transparent with the city, Dr. Blaine, making sure, and Mr. Eison, making sure everybody was on board with what our plan is. We really want to stress, we want to do this as a partner with the city, and not want. We need to do this as a partner with the city. We need the city to be a partner with us. So that advertisement, absolutely, we think we should be getting those school kids back onto the grounds.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. President, my questions to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, it was rumored, and we thought it was lies, that there was $50 million to move the zoo. Have we seen $1 million, one penny, or any of that $50 million that was rumored that they had to move the zoo? Because throughout this community, people said they were lies, $150 million anywhere. Have we seen any of those millions that they said they had?
I'm not aware of any money at this time. No.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Councilman Banks and then Councilman Tillman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for Thank you guys for taking the opportunity time to, basically inform us. So my concern is basically, the operation and how we're changing the transition of it. We've gone from having the Zoological Society, who is a nonprofit, who had a fundraising arm, and from my understanding, they were responsible for picking or selecting a manager. We're going into a process now where the administration is selecting a management group. So I want to hear more about what you're doing, maybe closer to us. In St. Louis, you all oversee the St. Louis Aquarium or manage the St. Louis Aquarium at Union Station, correct?
It's currently in construction, and we are third-party operators of that facility. That's correct.
So just kind of talk me through kind of what you're doing. I see here that there's a St. Louis Aquarium Foundation or something that's being set up. Is that something that was already set up previously before you got there and they were raising money? I see here there being opportunities for volunteering. Kind of talk me through how that is running and then what you do, and I think that helps us to understand where your expertise is. If your expertise is strictly in managing and not so much in the development of foundations and running nonprofits and raising money, then we might need to look at another sector or look at someone who has that precise expertise. So I just kind of want to know what you're doing actually in St. Louis with those different deals that I mentioned. Thank you.
Certainly. Within St. Louis, we were involved with the project. We've been here for about 2 years now, so we started during the initial concept design. What we do is we will be the operator of the aquarium. The aquarium itself is a for-profit entity. As a result, you legally can have no direct oversight into the foundation. That needs to have a separate executive director. But in order for both of those organizations to work as efficiently as possible, we work very closely with our foundation executive director. At the moment, what we do is we work with the owners of the aquarium, a hospitality group, and we provide all of the animal-specific and operational-specific information that they need. Everything from just caring for the animals, as well as what programs we will be offering, what our staffing will look like, outlining what our volunteer opportunities would be, and then again working very closely with the foundation in order to solidify those. Essentially everything that goes into operating the aquarium, we provide input for. Websites, everything down to the very last, what is going to go onto the graphic panel, on the sign in front of the exhibit, everything the public will experience. So we work very closely with every entity, the owner, the contractor, the architect, the executive director of the foundation, to make sure that that's one cohesive unit. Did that answer that question for you?
It did. My question next is to Dr. Blaine. So, from what I see with what they're doing in St. Louis, they have a separate foundation with another executive director that probably does more of the fundraising and everything. Is the expectation that they would handle all of what was going on, or is the city going to be looking at setting up maybe a different foundation to begin to take care of that nonprofit owner?
So the current organization is that there is a board that essentially historically has had fiduciary responsibility of the zoo. Our thinking is that the board needs to be more of a fundraising arm of the organization, and so we will be creating structures and appointing people to the board to really focus on the fundraising side of the organization, and then to be able to have the structure to be able to have the relationship between the board and the management group, such that we're providing the funds on the private side in order to be able to supplement what's happening at the zoo itself.
I would add that while all of that is being contemplated, these are things that will be clarified by the final agreement and that we will present to the council.
So Yeah, and right before Kylie answers, because I don't know if this part that we're talking about would be in agreement if we're talking about setting up maybe another foundation or another nonprofit. I think that that's going to be as important. From my understanding, what I hear you saying is this agreement will have strictly the management side of what it takes to manage the zoo. But as far as the fundraising, the nonprofit, all of the other kind of stuff, you all are going to take a dive into how to.
Yeah, a contract must spell out clearly. It must clearly articulate the roles and responsibilities, and so that is one thing that we would walk into that contract with keeping in mind is that is clearly spelled out.
All right, Mr. Tillman, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. President. In Jackson, the community and the administration and the city council would really like to have what we call a first-class zoo, fully accredited. We had some concerns at one point lately about the accreditation of the zoo. Myself and Councilman Stamps really work with the zoo managers to fulfill and hold on to the accreditation. Talk to me a little about your involvement in making sure that the zoos you work with are accredited.
Certainly. It is our goal to always operate any zoo or aquarium, any facility that we are a part of, that the operations of those facilities not only meet but exceed industry standards, worldwide standards. So some of our facilities, the ownerships group have chosen not to get accreditation. We operate the facility as if we're going to have it. And the short answer would be the Jackson Zoo, we would certainly want to see AZA accreditation continue. There are a lot of moving parts in order to obtain accreditation, and so we would want to work very closely with the city to make sure that was something that was obtained. To give you an example, it's something that we're striving for the St. Louis Aquarium, which we've started the process already. The aquarium will not be open until the end of this year, and we anticipate that we'll be receiving accreditation within our first year and a half of operations.
All right. Anyone else have any questions? Mr. Stamps?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one final question, just to clarify. Financial oversight, how often would we be doing the reporting for the finances? Quarterly? I just don't want to wait till an audit. Audits are 18 months old most of the time, but we'll be doing quarterly financial.
You're talking about from ZooOceanarium to the city? Is that what you mean?
Correct.
Part of our ongoing negotiation is how often that structure will be. My intention is that we would meet at least quarterly, if not more than that. Especially as we are making the transition and within the first year, we need to make sure that we fully support ZooOceanarium Group in order to be able to give them all the resources that they would need as far as information from the community, the ways that they can contact the community, the way that we integrate initiatives together, also integrating between our strategy from the city of uplifting neighborhoods. And so focusing on blight elimination, focusing on Livingston Park, focusing on the golf course, focusing on the airport. We have several assets in that part of the city, and we need to have a cohesive strategy that brings all of those assets together. So we intend to have communication on a regular basis as we move forward with that strategy.
Let me interrupt. I think also our intent is always to learn from previous mistakes. One of the things that we've seen in the prior management is that the city nor the board necessarily had a up-to-date understanding of what the financial circumstance of the zoo was. And so we would walk into this keeping that in mind to make certain that we're not caught in those that same cycle.
All right, Council Lady Lindsay.
Look, the devil's in the details, and I know we're not at a place where we can really talk about the details, but for the administration, I think it is really important as we move forward to remember that there will be some downtime. There will be some time when money won't be coming in, and we really need to understand what the financial obligation for year one will look like and what the financial obligation for year two will look like. And also in the previous modeling for a lot of zoos across the country, the nonprofit arm is what sometimes makes up the difference. And I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know how we go about that. I mean, the city can't really set up a zoo foundation, but we can work within the community to get that done, or we can revamp what exists. I mean, there's an existing 501c3. And so I do, as we move, if the board votes to move forward with this, those are the kinds of things that I think we really are going to need to know about and we're going to need to see. So,
yeah. I'll just say that the administration has demonstrated outside of this particular project that we welcome all philanthropic dollars that can help advance the objectives of our city. And so I don't see why this circumstance would be any different from our desire to invite those type of entities to support our efforts.
All right, we've been addressing this for about an hour. I'll let Councilman Banks have the last word unless anyone else has anything particularly pressing.
Yeah. Just a question, or maybe something to ponder. The Zoological Society that's currently there, it might be worth it since they have the relationships. Maybe we might need to reorganize how the board is and the makeup of it, but keeping them intact and letting them be the actual 501c3, since the city legally can't set up another 501c3 to raise on. Because from my understanding, it was the management and not necessarily the Zoological Society that the city had the problem with.
That's what our strategy is. There are several appointments to that board. There have been several resignations. We need to make sure that there is a board that's constituted, that's focused on fundraising, that has the membership necessary in order to be able to do that. And so, just as we did with the school board, we were looking at specific skill sets that we needed to populate with that board with in order to be able to have the collective power to be able to implement that work. We would be looking at the exact same strategy around the zoo board as well.
And furthermore, we know that some members of that board, from conversations they've had with me, are quite simply just tired. They've served on it for some time. Maybe this invigorates them, but we'll try to keep as much consistency as we can, taking what has worked and being adaptive to the things that need correction.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? All right, I believe that was unanimous. All right.
Mr. President,
Mr. Stokes.
I know you're ready for the vote on that. Mr. Mayor, may I suggest that your office contact Ruben Anderson? During Ruben Anderson's time, they had a separate board. Ruben Anderson, Earl Jones, and some more. But he is alive. He can tell how it worked. They used to go get money from some of these organizations, and because it's plenty of people want to donate. Where you talk about the casinos, where you talk about other businesses, to make sure that the Jackson Zoo become the outstanding zoo that it used to be. Thank you.
Yeah, we've met with Ruben Anderson about the zoo last year. All
right, Mr. Tillman.
Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to just make one last comment. It's important to me that we thoroughly look at how we set up the organizational structure of the zoo. It's very important what we put in the contract. I've been on this council for some years, and some that we talk what we want, what we like to see, but sometimes we miss putting certain things in the contract that kills the whole thing. Thank you.
All right. Item number 2, please.
Order authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Styling Your Life Solutions, LLC, to provide